Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janabalaba Giridvaradhari Gopi Janabalaba Giridvaradhari Yasoda Nandana Pradasana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namo Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavari Pasadhyadi Satarine Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Grada Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Nitai Gaur, Hare Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hare Bol, Nitai Gaur. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, it's our great fortune to have amongst us His Grace Prithu Prabhu. Prabhu was born and brought up in a traditional family of Germany and pursued his studies in field of comparative religion in Bonn University. He came in contact with ISKCON in 1972 and he got Ishopanishad from devotees, read it in one night and joined ISKCON next day. Haribol! Prabhuji received initiation from His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada in the same year, 1972. He actively assisted Srila Prabhupada in preaching Krishna consciousness and arranged meeting of Prabhupada with various philosophers, including famous German philosopher Graf Durkheim. Later on, he served as the temple president in Germany. Further started center in Switzerland and subsequently also served as the temple president in Amsterdam. Later, he was also the in charge of for Detroit temple. Subsequently, Prabhuji went to Ireland and started a wonderful farm community over there. Later, he came to India and started Srila Prabhupada Vani Ashram in ISKCON Vrindavan. In India, he had traveling bus party to preach in various colleges, including IIT Kanpur. He preached in IIT Kanpur from 1987 till 1995 for 8 years, and many members became devotees placed as professors in IIT Guwahati, IIT Varanasi, COEP Pune, serving in Bhaktivedanta Institute, etc. Our Gaurlila Prabhu was also introduced by Prabhuji. And then Prabhuji started preaching in Russia afterwards. 2 years ago, moved from Germany to India. Since that time, he has been traveling and preaching extensively in different places. He met Srila Prabhupada several times in Germany, France, Paris, London, India. And he also was very present personally in the last 3 weeks of Srila Prabhupada's departure from this planet. He altogether served as GBC for 20 years from 1984 to 2004 for places like Ireland, Germany, America, Oregon, Washington, Vrindavan, Hyderabad, Delhi, etc. and was also serving with His Holiness Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj. He raised his children in good Krishna consciousness, and they are nicely practicing Krishna consciousness, including his grandchildren. So it's our great fortune. Let us welcome Prabhuji to our temple by loudly chanting Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Thank you very much. Sounds good. But you didn't mention that on my birthday at noon, the sky became very dark and it starts raining blood, stool and urine. You didn't mention that. Bones also. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. O Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. What is the first word? First word is? Ved. Oh, this one. Vishvodbhavastana nirodha karmate yakartam angikritam apya pavrita yuktana chitram tvai karya karane savatmani yatitrikte chavastutaha. We go to the second verse, I think, because there's a purport there. Anyway, translation, O Lord, although you are completely detached from the creation, maintenance and annihilation of this material world, and are not directly affected by these activities, they are all attributed to you. We do not wonder how this is, for your inconceivable energies perfectly qualify you to be the cause of all causes. You are the active principle in everything, although you are separate from everything. Thus we can realize that everything is happening because of your inconceivable energy. Now, is that verse there? Vedan? Okay, then I'll just read it. Vedan yuganti tamasa tira kritan rasatalat yonri turanga vigraha pratya padeva kavaye biyate tasmai namaste vitate hitaya iti. At the end of the millennium, ignorance personified assumed the form of a demon and stole all the Vedas and took them down to the planet of Rasatala. The Supreme Lord, however, in his form of Hayagriva, retrieved the Vedas and returned them to Brahma when he begged for them. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the Supreme Lord, whose determination never fails. Purport. Although Vedic knowledge is imperishable, within this material world it is sometimes manifest and sometimes not. When the people of this material world become too much absorbed in ignorance, the Vedic knowledge disappears. Lord Hayagriva or Lord Matsya, however, always protect the Vedic knowledge, and in due course of time it is always distributed through the medium of Lord Brahma. Brahma is a trustworthy representative of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, when he again asks for the treasure of Vedic knowledge, Lord fulfills their desire. Om Agyanti Midandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshunamritam Vinatasmai Siguravinmaham Sri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Mina Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasudeva Go Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna So we don't hear much in generally about Hayagriva. We know there are so many forms of God, manifestations of God, expansions of God. But Lord Hayagriva, Prabhupada never mentioned much about him. I had some experience with Lord Hayagriva at one stage, actually. I was distributing books, and I got involved, which is not unusual, in an argument with a Christian brother. And so I challenged him, how, you have no idea of God, you don't know how he looks. So he challenged back, he said, and you know? I said, yes. So can you show me? He said, yes. So I opened the book, and there was Lord Hayagriva. I showed this into his face, God, a horse incarnation. He ran away. He was in a shock. He'll never forget that, and would certainly tell his friends that we are worshipping a horse. Krishna can take any form. And as it says here, that in this verse, where did I find this verse here? He's the active principle and he's detached. He can do anything he wants. You see, one time, Prabhupada in one purport, in his life, at the end of his life actually, he said, I said this yesterday also, last sentence was, everything moving and non-moving, there's nothing but Krishna. This consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. And it was a profound sentence just before he uttered his last two words, namely Hare Krishna. And but then I read in Bhagavatam, in its purport to the Bhagavatam, there's one verse, let me just pick it out, where he says, give me a second. Oops, where are we here? There. Okay. This is very good. He said, basically speaking, I repeat as I can remember, he said, actually, in the ultimate analysis, there's only one being. Not many beings, there's only one being. And they quoted the Sanskrit for it, which I thought was an amazing thought because I've never heard this in church. There's only one being, and that is Krishna. And we are all his parts and parcels, different, expansions. Some are direct expansions of Krishna, and some are, like ourselves, external energy, marginal energy of Krishna. So the pastimes of Krishna like that are very amazing. Just like, if you remember, that Rupa Goswami said that the activities of Krishna are beyond the law of physics. It's a very important thing. You cannot, with physical means, you cannot see anything. You can see something. You can see within 3 dimensions. We have access to 3 dimensions of reality. It's just like when you work in a company, the people on the floor, or shop floor, they have access to the factory and the toilet maybe. Then the next level of people, they have been given more access. They can enter, a room where the more higher people meet their food, for example, they eat separately and they talk to each other. And common people have no access to that. Then there's another layer, and ultimately there is the boardroom, where you have to have, you need to have that card that opens the boardroom for you. This accessibility is given according to knowledge and according to responsibility. And trust, according to trust, So if Krishna he has more trust in us, then automatically he gives us more access. It's very simple. Even in the material world it is like this. In every factory, in every university you have that you get different cards. Even here, to go to this door, here on the first floor, I got a card. Not everybody can do that, but I have a card. Since I have a card, I have access, you see? And so in the same way, in Krishna consciousness, that different people have different access, different degrees of access to reality. And then we can understand from there, from scripture, we are getting more access. But it is not complete. It's complete in itself, but we have to realize it. You see, for example, when Krishna was playing with the cowherd boys, you read this in Bhagavatam, that at one stage Krishna wanted to have a lunch in the forest, and so he blew his conch, his buffalo horn rather, to inform devotees to gather. And then it says so many cowherd boys came out of their houses, and so many calves. But actually in the commentaries of the Acharyas, it said trillions of cows, trillions of cowherd boys, trillions. When the gopis in rasa dance, it is stated that trillions of gopis were there actually. Imagine that, trillions. And with every one of these gopis, Krishna had a direct relationship. So the best way for us limited human beings is to use the concept of dimensions. Dimensions that Krishna was in his own dimension with every gopi. That makes it relatively clear. But actually it's all Krishna in the ultimate issue. So dimensionality is a human concept, it's a crutch. But it's helpful. Just like, for example, when we go to Kailash, or some of our devotees went there, in the Lumnama, Satchinanda. So what do you see? An hospitable mountain. That's all, cold. But if you hear Shastra, Lord Shiva sits there in great gravity under a banyan tree, 800 miles across and high. Kumars are there, and beautiful gardens and elephants, and a whole world that we have no access to. We don't have that card to see that. On the same way, the moon, what do we see on the moon? Even if they go there, and there are plenty of people who have doubt about that you can actually go there. But like yesterday I explained, if you go into the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., in the mall, you can actually see the moon rock. And people, there's a huge crowd of people, standing in it. Worshipping a rock that probably came from the desert of Arizona. Because cheating is one of the mentality of, one of the faults of human beings, You can't trust it. You can't trust it, You can't trust anything but the karma state, basically speaking, It's always limited knowledge. To some degree, it is knowledge, but ultimately, it is limited knowledge. And so, when we think of Krishna, I thought like this for the last almost 50 years. Krishna dances gopis, there are 30 gopis, or maybe 40, and Krishna dances. We show this in this circle. If any rasa dance, you see about 30 gopis maximum, right? But they're actually trillions. It's a complete different way of looking at it. Just like I looked at this one picture here in the diorama, where Krishna is sitting with the cowherd boys and eating lunch, right? But actually, if you look at the verse, and also particularly under the commentaries of Vishwanath Chakravarti, the verse says like they were sitting like in a lotus flower. Krishna was in the center, and there are many petals. And all these petals are surrounding the hub. So one should think from that picture that some sat behind Krishna and could see only the backside. But the truth is that everybody saw Krishna at the same time. This is Krishna's magic. It's a beyond human dimensionality. Even a practical example I use always, I got it from Sariputta, to explain dimensionality. That simple example, you want to meet somebody in a department store, and you call 6 o'clock, and you go there, he's not there. You wait 10 past 6, you call him, I'm in the department store. So why don't they see each other? And why do they will never see each other? Why? Anybody has an answer? They're upstairs. They're in a different dimension, in the third dimension. Or take an example, does somebody have a bead back here? I have a bead back. I give you a very simple example. Say, what's this? To show that you have to come here. Don't worry, I don't do anything to you. Hold this like this. See, there are two ants. They want to go from A to B, right? Here's A, here's B. The first ant is dull. He has a brain like a buffalo and can only understand 2 dimensions, front, back, left and right. So for him to go from A to B is a long way, right? And he's surprised to see the other ant is already there. He says, how did you do that? Well, I just went from A to B. He has three-dimensional understanding, right? It's very simple. So sometimes we thought, when we heard a yogi can appear in Mayapur in the Ganges and next in the Yamuna, you think that he flies in the sky on a carpet or something. But actually, on a higher dimensional level, Mathura and Vrindavan, Mathura and Mayapur is next to each other on a higher level. That's why somebody can disappear. He just goes into another dimension. Very simple. Even Kamsa could do that. Not Kamsa. Who did it? Hiranyakashipu could do that. So this is a very simple way to explain what is actually the almighty powerful of Krishna. He can do anything. He can do anything. He's beyond space, first of all, mundane space. And that's why we can't buy a ticket to Vrindavan. I was puzzled when I heard that. I'm here. How come we can do it? There's one Vrindavan, the Boma Vrindavan, and then there's another one, a transcendental Vrindavan, which we don't have access to. Very simple, we can't see it. Others, highly elevated souls, can see it. Rupa saw it, Sanatan. They entered into these transcendental dimensions of Krishna consciousness. And so the whole world is like this. Krishna is beyond physics. And not only that, he's beyond time. There's a famous story, most of you might know this, that Krishna wanted water. He wanted to drink some water. You know that story? So he went with devotees said Narada. Prabhupada called from the window upstairs in Los Angeles. Narada is never in Maya. So there was a devotee, one devotee, and he walked with Krishna. He was an associate with Krishna. And Krishna said, I feel thirsty. Can you get me some water? He said, yes. He said, I will sit down here under this tree. Nice shady. Get me some water. So the devotee, he asked, like Arjuna asked this question, can you show me universal form? This devotee asked Krishna, can you show me your Maya? And Krishna said, it can be done. So then he went to this village, could see there's a little village, he knocked at the door, and there was this extremely beautiful girl came out. Extremely beautiful. And he looked at her, and she looked at him, and he looked again in their face, and again, and gradually they got involved. There was love between him and this girl. And he heard himself saying, would you like to marry me? And she said, yes. And they got married. And there was marriage sacrifice. Ultimately, there were children coming first, 1, 2, 3 children he had. Her father died. He inherited everything, the house and the farm and everything. And then by the end, he was completely absorbed in this grihastha life. And so one day there was a flood, a huge flood. Like I've been in a flood in Himalayas from one moment to another. It's just unbelievable. You got to get back to home really quick. And so this flood came and washed villages away. And they saw the villages, people come down there in the stream. And he realized we will have the same fate, but on the other side the land is higher. You see, land is higher. So he took his children on his shoulders and swam his wife also by the hand. Then he lost one child. And he screamed, oh Krishna, why do you do this? He lost another child. He lost all his children. Finally, he lost his wife. And then he broke down, a wave threw him on the land. And he broke down and cried for Krishna. And then he heard a name, Krishna's voice, ask him, where's my water? You see, Krishna is completely beyond time and space. It's a nice story, really, 12 years had passed, which was just a moment in real time. In Maya, it was stretched by Maya in such a long period. So Krishna can do anything. And there are so many examples like that in our scriptures where you show this, that the gopis stayed with Krishna one night. And it was a night of Brahma. That's another example, that he's beyond time. And not only that, he can do whatever he wants. Just like when Narada came to Dwarka, he saw Krishna playing in one house in this way, another one playing chess, another one. So he can expand himself in as many Krishnas as he wants. There are many examples in our scriptures. Just like, for example, let me just think about this one. Oh, give me a moment. Wonderful. That's the word. Wonderful. Wonderful. 1 second. Wonderful. Krishna. Krishna once visited Shrutadevi, Deva, and King Bahulasva in Videha, because they were both his devotees. And then he entered the palace of the king and the house of the Brahmana at the same time. He can do that. We can't do that. It would be nice if we could do that. But we can do different things at the same time. A boy may talk to a girl, looking at another girl and thinking of a third time at the same time, right? That's possible. That's the usual thing, actually. But Krishna, he's that one personality that is able to associate with unlimited living beings in form of the super soul at the same time, in a very individual way. That's only Krishna can do. Only Krishna can do. And I never heard this in church. I had to come to the Hare Krishna movement to hear this, you know, to see the unlimited powers of Krishna. You know, he says, according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, Krishna visited Shrutadev in Bahulasva in the same time by manifesting himself in duplicate forms along with the sages. Thus Bahulasva thought that Krishna had only come to his house, leaving Shrutadev to return home disappointed. But Shrutadev believed that just the reverse was true. Krishna was with him, but not with Bahulasva. And in this way, let's think of some of these different pastimes. Oops, how do I do this? We have already discussed the Dwarka Lila pastime. In Brahma Vihomana Lila, he expanded himself in so many calves and cowboys. I mean, it's unbelievable. Think about that. You know, and the mothers could not distinguish. You know, this is my own boy, this is an extension of Krishna. You know, they couldn't distinguish. So these are the example how Krishna is unlimited and can do whatever he wants. Then it says here that in the rasa dance, the gopis arranged themselves in a circle. The Lord expanded himself, entered between each pair of the gopis, and that master of mystic power placed his arms around their neck. Each girl thought that he was standing next to her alone. There you have the same phenomena. And then there's, of course, when Krishna tamed the 7 bulls. That's another example, that he expanded himself in 7 bulls. And then there's an example, even Chaitanya Lila, that Lord Chaitanya expanded himself in so many different Sankirtan groups. And they couldn't see that. Who could see it? King Prataparudra and Prataparudra. They were standing on the roof. They had access, they had that card to see that actually. You see, nobody else could see it. And there are so many examples in Krishna Lila. Let me just see if I can find on a quick something else. And the awesome commentaries here of the Acharyas. We had that one already. Let's see, there's another one. The dancing in 7 different groups during the Sankirtan. Lord Chaitanya then exhibited another mystic power by performing pastimes simultaneously in all 7 groups, it says. Hare, Eka, Shakti, Prabhu, etc. Next verse, everyone said, Lord Chaitanya is present in my group. He does not go anywhere else. He is bestowing his mercy upon us. And then it says, actually, no one could see the inconceivable potency of the Lord. Only the most confidential devotees, those pure in unalloyed devotional service, could understand that. And then the most striking, Sarvabhauma Sanghe Raja Kare Tara Tari Ara Keha nahi jane Chaitanya Kuri. Must be, who's Bengali here? From Bengal? Anyone? I feel sorry for my Bengali. It must be painful to your ears. So the king and Sarvabhauma Parashai were both aware of the Lord's activities. No one else could see the tricks of the Lord. No one else could see it. So Krishna can do anything and everything. You know, one devotee told me recently, and it was an older devotee, he thinks that this idea that Lord Shiva is on top of Kailash, this is mythology. That is reality. We are in Maya. We don't see. What we consider real is not the full reality. We can see the sun. In Pratyaksha you see the sun in the morning, in the evening, red, at noon very white, and too hot. And but then with scientific research, it's this and this big, so far away, all these things, but nobody knows about Vivasvan, which is the actual reality. At the heart of the sun is Lord Vivasvan. And so many sages in the size of thumbs flying in front of him, glorifying him. That's actually the reality. The rasa dance is the reality. We just are limited. We don't have access to it. Our perception is very limited. Imagine a mouse here in the temple, sitting right here, even if she sits on my lap, what can she understand? Nothing. What goes on? I'm in Pune, in this temple, and there's so many devotees here. There's Krishna right there. You can't understand. Bullocks also, particular water buffaloes, can understand anything. And so we should understand that the access human beings have to reality is very little. And therefore, the attempts of scientists in this particle accelerator in Switzerland, there's this huge accelerator where by magnetic power, these particles go faster and faster and faster, and then at one stage there's a loop, half the particles go here and jam into these particles, they took a loop. They jam into each other, head on, and they think they can, mimic the Big Bang. That's the idea. And in fact, when they started this, in Germany, there was a petition of scholars. They said, don't do that. We don't know what's going to happen. What if a black hole develops? I read it in the major newspapers. What if a black hole develops when you do that? And then we get all sucked in. I said, well, let's try it out. Let's see what happens. That is a mentality. Let's see what happens. When Prabhupada left his body, and I tell you, I was right there. Somebody gave him medicine. And Prabhupada said, did you close the bottle? And I thought, no. He's almost at the time of death. Is it relevant? Then Prabhupada said, no, Prabhupada. He said, Prabhupada, that is your disease, all of you. He said, you know how to open bottles, but you don't know how to close them. You start so many new things, and you do not see the consequences. A phenomenon we see in ISKCON many, many times over in the past and at present. We don't see the consequences of what we do. He says, you know how to live, but you don't know how to die. And therefore I have to show you how to die. And then later he called Yaduba to actually film it. This is a sequence, how this works together. It started with this conversation. It's something so simple that if somebody doesn't close a bottle, ultimately Prabhupada concluded, I have to have somebody to film my departure. You see? Because we don't know. We are just walking, let's try this one, like a child, If you leave a child in a room, he does everything. Sometimes he sticks his finger in his nose, sometimes he sticks his finger into the plug of electricity. Let's see what happens. He's childish. So these people, they can research for millions of times in this particle accelerator and come forward with different theories. But they will never come to the conclusion. What is it? To the reality of it. What is the origin of the universe? Mahavishnu. That they cannot see. That's the actual cause of the universe. They will never be able to go to see that because they don't have access. They don't have that access card. Never. We go around and around and around and around, around. A new theory, another theory, another. They talk about the God particle, you see. But they cannot see God or have any idea of God because they're impious. They don't have impious souls are not allowed to even see Radha Govinda here on the altar. They can't even come. That somebody comes, that's already Krishna's mercy. He's given some access to this realm. They can't even come there, completely fighting with other people about their different theories and forget their soul. Completely. By the end of the day, they were living a lie. Namely that I'm the body. And there's no such a thing like soul. And they're convinced of it. I give you a very strong example. One friend of mine, Manidhar Prabhu, he Sankirtan devotee, and he had a toothache in one of his teeth right in front. So he went to the doctor in Germany and on Sankirtan in his robes. The doctor said, all right, now I have one of you Hare Krishnas here in my place. What you have, and he showed him, it needs to be drilled. He said, what is your philosophy? And Manidhara explained to him that in the ultimate issue we are soul. And he said, the soul does not exist. You can forget that. That is ridiculous. He said, no, we are soul, you are soul. The soul does not exist. And it went back and forth between the two. It became so heated that the doctor took his plier, grabbed his tooth, and he said, the soul does not exist, and pulled a perfectly healthy tooth out of his mouth. Think about that, the degree of envy he had, of an idea that there's of his own soul and of the supreme soul. And he has these big glasses, just like one of these guys in the concentration camps, like Mengele. He was one of these famous, he had these big glasses, and look, the soul does not exist. And pulled his tooth out. So determined, to stamp out God. So determined. Demons, obviously. It's a wonderful example, isn't it? And Manidhar, he laughed so much that the blood spread on the coat of the doctor. He laughed and he couldn't believe it. It was just such a classic, iconic moment. You see, so absorbed in whatever it may be, the center of the universe or their wives or whatever. Everything else except Krishna. Because the common mood is of anybody who's here. Why are we in the material world? Why? Because we are running away from Krishna. That's the thing. We have that mode. Modus operandi. Operandi is a way to run away from Krishna. And you can experience it best when you chant japa. Chant japa, you try to concentrate on Facebook. This and that, because we are running away from Krishna since time immemorial. That's the mood of every living entity in the material world, that he is a deviant. We left Krishna. And we know this from our scriptures. There's one verse, something with Buliya, I forgot. That's the one, right? The Bhaktisiddhanta said that we developed aversity to Krishna even. And then he says, like Adam and Eve, he said, we fell like shooting stars from the spiritual sky. And so Adam and Eve, as in Christian, Jewish, Muslim thought, they're not historical persons. They're you and me. This is our story, right? It's our story. And when you study the story, it's very interesting that they did not have access to the whole paradise. There was one area they were not supposed to go. There was a tree. And they were not supposed to eat from this forbidden tree. And then the snake came. It says, do you know why you're not supposed to eat from that tree? I said, no. If you eat from this tree, you become as good as God. There you have it. And Adam, he tried to stay away from it, but his wife, she said, oh, let's try that out. And she tried, and she became agitated. Sexually agitated. And then Adam, he became sexually agitated, and they fell. This is the fall. How that actually happened, because the snake, Maya, was telling them, you become God. And Prabhupada, one time, I spoke about this yesterday, that I was always wondering, why would Krishna tell Lord Shiva to come down as Shankaracharya, preach Mayavadi philosophy? Why did Krishna do that? And then finally I saw the answer Prabhupada said in a conversation. He said, Mayavadi philosophy is Krishna's device to protect the purity of pure devotional service. It's a trap. We all heard Prabhupada said it's the last snare of Maya. It's a snare. Snare means a trap. And so, if somebody has this mentality, maybe even perform devotional service or something, be pious about it. If that mentality is there, he wants to be God. He cannot understand Krishna. I mean, I met many devotees, people who were close to us. One is even initiated, not by Prabhupada, but by one of the godbrothers of Srila Prabhupada. And he's nice, he has a spiritual name, but he has been listening to the Maharishi Maharaj Yogi for the last 30 or 40 years. And he cannot get over that because that poison doesn't allow him to just embrace Krishna. It doesn't allow him. That poison of Mayavadi. He can't. And when he says something, it's all a Mayavadi view on Krishna consciousness. So there are different snares. Like all these religions in the world are actually created by Krishna. If you want to eat meat, you can have that. Religions who tell you there is meat. You can eat meat, no problem. Even the top religionists, I don't want to be personal, but I know the top man in the church. He broke the regulated 7 times in one meal. 7 times in one meal. And I don't want to tell you what animals he took. 4 different types of animals. And he in one meal, one sitting. And then he drank Merkur wine. That's another one. And then he drank Irish coffee in the end. That's coffee and whiskey. So 7 times he broke the principles in one single meal. And how can you understand Krishna? How can you understand anything about Krishna? And then when that same person was asked by one little girl in Japan at the time of tsunami, it so happened that there was a teleconference all over the world. The Pope would speak. And she said, Holy Father, all my friends are dead. Why is that? Where's God here? And he said, I ask myself the same questions. He said, and we don't have the answer. How can you have the answer if your lifestyle is so averse to God? Why do you think that any director allows an employee to have access to the higher realms of his institution if he knows he's not following, ultimately? He does his own thing. Very simple. Very simple how that works, And so only by undivided devotion, Mr. Scientist, only by undivided devotion can Krishna be understood. As he's standing before you, he's everywhere. But only by undivided devotion. Forget about this contraption you have built. It is 25 kilometers across diameter, underground. It costs trillions. Not just billions, it costs trillions. Ultimately to find the origin of the universe. And it's so much cheaper to buy Srimad Bhagavatam, and there you read how the Mahavishnu is emanating all these universes from his paw. Cheap and best. Right? It's cheap and best. In the same way, the Pope cannot answer the question, why. He said in the end of this discussion, he said, one day you may even understand why it is so, he said. It doesn't have to be one day. You get into your taxi, your Uber, and drive to the temple and buy a Bhagavad Gita and read the second chapter, and there you know why you're suffering in this life, because in your past life you did this and that and that, you know. But if they have no knowledge of the pastime or deny the pastime, the past life, according to church teaching, anyone who believes in the pre-existence of the soul is doomed to hell. That means Krishna is going to hell, Vyasadeva goes to hell, or Chaitanya, Prabhupada, we all will go to hell. This is bizarre. You know, you don't know whether you should laugh or cry when you hear that. You know, it's just such a lack of knowledge. And so we are very fortunate that we can hear about these incredible pastimes that Krishna performs during his stay on this planet, and nobody can understand. Nobody can understand. So unmired, so have such little access to reality, and come to the wrong conclusions and agreeing and disagreeing with each other, like this verse from I think Mahabharata. That's what and forget their soul, like it says in Srimad Bhagavatam. They forget the essential thing. At the time of death, whatever they created will be destroyed. And I remember when Prabhupada came to Germany, Shamashunda called us, and he studied philosophy before, Shamashunda, in Germany also. And there's one philosopher, his name is Professor Heidegger. He probably influenced Western philosophy in the last century more than anybody else on the planet in the Western world. Awesome thinker. And he wrote a book, it's called Sein und Zeit, Being and Time. The being, or being and time. It is a book is so high that I can't figure it out, actually. It's just too high up, you know. But by the end of the day, when Prabhupada wanted to see him, I went to Freiburg in Germany. I took a train, 6 hours to see Heidegger. And when I came to the door, I found his house. I was in my dhoti, and the wife came out and said, "My God, who are you?" And I said, "Relax." I said, "Relax." He said, "I'm a monk, German boy, but I'm a monk in an Indian tradition of spirituality. And I would like to see your husband, because my guru wants to meet him." And she said, "My dear boy, it is too late." I said, "Why? Did he pass?" He said, "No, he's upstairs." He said, "But he cannot understand anything." So I said, "Okay, if I see him, he won't complain either." She said, "Yeah, that makes sense. You can." She smiled. She said, "Yeah, you can go." So I sat at his bed, and there he was, the most famous person in the world of philosophy at that time, Heidegger. He was lying there like this in bed, you know. He didn't open his eyes. He was breathing. And I said, his wife was at the feet, and I said to him, "Professor Heidegger." No reaction. "Professor Heidegger, can you hear me?" No reaction. I asked 3 times. Then I took Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is. I had it with me. And I said, "Give me a hand." Like this, he was lying. And he took it immediately, because he could understand this is a book. And then he took the book, actually, and opened his eyes. And he said, the truth, and nothing but the truth, what I'm saying, you know. He said, "Bhagavad Gita. I know this book, Bhagavad Gita." And he put it to his heart and fell back into unconsciousness. And his wife said, "I've never seen him since 10 years like that. How did he do that?" Prabhupada's mercy, because he never denied the existence of God in his philosophy. He came close to it. And Prabhupada's mercy is like that, you know, that he can touch somebody, and just like Charlie Chaplin. Prabhupada, you know the story that Charlie Chaplin was, Prabhupada saw a film of Charlie Chaplin and laughed heartily. He was so happy to see Charlie Chaplin. Now, that's only the first part of the story. A couple of years ago, a Sankirtan devotee from Switzerland, he went to Geneva where all the famous people live, and he knocked at the door, and he saw on the door Chaplin. There, he said, Chaplin, are you the wife of Charlie? He said, yes. He said, I am. And he presented her the books. He said, that Bhagavad Gita. He said, in the last months of his life, Charlie Chaplin was sitting at the lake and he was reading Bhagavad Gita all the time. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. He had so much power. You know, that even Charlie Chaplin was reading Bhagavad Gita. So I must end now. We are already over time. Hare Krishna. Is anyone has a question?
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji, for a wonderful class. I had a question. You mentioned that the Christians, they don't believe in the pre-existence of the soul.
What was that?
Christians don't believe in the pre-existence of the soul.
No, they don't have an concept of soul, really. There's no defined concept. Buddhists also. And Prabhupada talked to this famous professor, Durkheim, famous Buddhist. And he explained this Buddhist. Prabhupada asked always this question, what is your philosophy? And he spoke wonderfully. Because I was into Buddhism before. And then he asked Prabhupada, he was a very polite and humble person. He asked Prabhupada, so what do you think of my philosophy? And Prabhupada smiled at him very like a father, and he said, not very intelligent. And so he said, why do you say that? I mean, this guy is the same age of Prabhupada, 2 months younger, and famous, decorated with every decoration you can get from the government. He brought Zen Buddhism to the Western world. He said, why do you say that, Swamiji? And then Prabhupada explained to him, because, beyond the mind is the soul. What travels in Buddhism from body to body? They believe in reincarnation. The mind. It's the mind. And the mind does travel, we know that. Yam yama pismaran bhavam chidante and the kalibram. But the mind is just a vehicle. The linga sarira, part of the linga sarira of the soul. So actually it's the soul who's the passenger. And they have no knowledge of that. And Christians, Muslims, Jews, they have no knowledge of the passenger. They don't know who they are. If you don't know who you are, like a young person, doesn't know who he is, and he tries to be somebody else. And he sees somebody has a haircut like a pineapple, and he will immediately take he has an identity crisis. He lives in an identity crisis. He wants to give himself some identity, and now everybody in India runs around, looks like a pineapple. Isn't it? and sometimes people have the hat, this baseball cap, back. Why? In search of identity. Actually, there's a story that in America, all the schoolboys, college boys, they have their heads like this. And the teacher said, you take this hat off. If you speak, I want to know who you are. I want to see in your face. And he said, I'm not going to do it. He said, I kick you out of the classroom. And he took his head and turned it upside down, from here to there. And then other people saw that that's far out, and they did it. And ultimately, everybody does it, in search of identity. The craving of the soul, inside, craving for identity, and make their hair green or blue, and buying clothes, and decorating their face, and all this is all in search of identity. It shows a person in an identity crisis. All Western civilization, identity crisis, from childhood on. What is identity? The soul. The soul. They can't penetrate to that unless they have good guidance, good association. Ultimately, Bhagavad Gita. Not just Bhagavad Gita, I read Bhagavad Gita way before I came to the movement. But I couldn't figure out what was it all about, to tell the truth. When I read Prabhupada's books, first book, immediately everything brilliantly clear, brilliantly explained. I couldn't stop. I read all night. In the morning I went to the temple. It was just too good to be true almost,
So, Prabhuji, we have scientists' videos of reincarnations. So, what is the answer to this thing, like where it is very clearly scientifically proven?
There are many videos about scientists, reincarnation and all things are there. So what is their answer to that? What answers they have, those who don't believe in pre-existence?
Well, the answer is, the ultimate answer is very knowledge, Shabda Brahma. They may come close to it, sometimes. Just like you may hear the church bell ringing, but you don't know where they're hanging, right? You don't know the cause of it, the Sava Karakala, you don't know that. How actually everything is based on Krishna in the ultimate conclusion. He's the active principle of everything. Nothing exists, there's nothing that exists outside of Krishna. Like Prabhupada said, and this verse from the Bhagavatam, that there is only one living being, Krishna. So they don't have any idea. You have to have a teacher when you learn yoga or qigong or in fact, if you want to fly a plane. You need a teacher. And he had a teacher and he had a teacher. This principle of having a teacher is essential because it means that you admit your own limitation. You submit yourself. And so if somebody is not submissive, he cannot have any knowledge. It may come close to it. Even this Professor Heidegger, it came close to transcendence. But he cannot really get there unless you have a teacher and the mercy of a teacher. Like Arjuna, he said at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, now I regain my memory by your mercy. That is the point, the mercy, by the mercy of the spiritual master. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare Ram, Ram Hare. And again, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Ram, Hare. No, very loud because we want to wake up the Ritviks. Hare Krishna. Last time for all the Mayavadis in Pune. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.